What's going on, everybody? It is the one and only Q here from Retro Q Gaming, and well, you'll have to excuse me today for this episode of our 75th Quack experimental podcast. Now, not feeling the greatest, so we'll get through this. There is a big list of stuff at least to talk about. Some important stuff, some new stuff, all the usual stuff anyway. But it's gonna be probably a big one. Phrasing. But anyway, we have plenty to talk about. So we might as well get right into it. There's going to be lots of mistakes here today because, well, we'll cover that a little bit later. Anyway, Cyberpunk 2077 is our very first one. Now, of course, Cyberpunk 2077 looks like a fantastic game, and it's going to be out in just over a month from now. However, you have to take into consideration who is making the game, CD Projekt Red. Now, CD Projekt Red are praised as the considerate company that everyone loves and who treats everyone and their employees properly. Now, I will say before we go any further, there's a big asterisk about this because one person is reporting one thing, this person has been run out of the industry before because they're absolutely hated, and there's a bunch of people refuting and rebuting what he says. Now, back to the point here. So, the notes that I took, I didn't edit to reflect this, so I may trip over some stuff here. But anyway, the point is that Cyberpunk 2077 is just over a month away from now, and even after delaying the game several times, twice already, I believe, totaling about 7 months. The company who even went out of their way to say, oh, well, we won't be crunching and make a big deal of how they're not going to be crunching and all as well, have now announced that they will be crunching for approximately 6 weeks, which is up until launch. Now, there's a couple of things to note about this that's going to get a bit messy simply because my notes are absolutely everywhere on this particular topic. So, their definition of crunch, for this one, at least anyway, or at least people's definition of crunch for this situation, is working 6 days a week instead of 5 days a week, and with overtime pay. Apparently a lot of companies in America, and well, just North America in general, hell, even in Europe as well, possibly even Japan, when they do crunch, they don't pay people. Sometimes they don't pay people at all. Sometimes they don't pay people overtime, but you get the idea. Now, many people are praising CD Projekt Red for this. Now, remember, this all ties in a little bit later because the notes are done out of order with context all over the place. But many people are praising CD Projekt Red for this. And they're talking, it's like, oh, well, at least they're only making them work one extra day and they're paying them overtime and the usual kind of thing. But remember, keep that same energy that you had when that shithole studio like Naughty Dog, who crunched for months and months on end to make a shite game and bad gifts that basically had arguably no difference on the actual outline and outcome of the game. Keep the same energy as all of that. Now, of course, the overall culture is the problem. The overall gaming culture and gaming development. Publishers hitting deadlines, etc. Developers hitting deadlines and publishers unwilling to move from such a thing. Now, of course, I'm not going to be completely oblivious, if you will, to this kind of one as well. Because yes, granted, it is 2020. It's been a bit of a weird year. And, I mean, not even counting COVID, because that is where a bunch of this, for many studios, supposedly comes from. But it's just, this stuff happens all the time. This stuff happens on so many games, arguably all games, all the time. It's kind of crazy. And it's been happening for years with different developers and publishers. So there's no kind of win in this one. Now, the important thing to note as well is the game has gone gold. So it means the master has been shipped off to be pressed onto all these discs, to be put out onto all these consoles and uploaded digitally to be available on digital distribution and all that stuff. So that means that over the next 6 weeks or so, or I guess it's probably about 5 weeks at this point, they're working on stuff like the day one patch, they're working on bug fixes, possible updates, possible new content, all that kind of stuff as well. Now, here is where the extra little bit of notes and extra little bit of context come in. Because as I mentioned earlier, all of this may not be true. Or at least it may not be true in the way it was originally portrayed and the way I wrote down these notes. Simply because, as I mentioned earlier, the main person who reported on all this, I'm not going to give his name because he's a trash piece of shit and he was run out of the gaming industry for a reason, because everyone hates him. Well, the big one is that he portrayed all this one way. Now, multiple other, whatever you want to call them, journalists or multiple other podcasters, YouTubers, reviewers, whatever they go by, whatever, it's all kind of the same thing. But basically, many of them have talked to what accumulates to dozens and dozens and dozens of people working in or around or with the studio, CD Projekt Red. And apparently, the new situation that the studio has given out with the overtime pay 6 days a week, or the extra 1 day a week with overtime pay, we should say, just because someone's going to come out and say, oh, but Q, they're not getting paid 6 days of overtime every week. That's, you get my idea. I have to be very, very clear about this because, well, people like to jump all over the semantics and the wording of all this stuff. But apparently this is what the actual developers, the team members themselves, not just the executives, not just the management, but the actual team members, many of them have been asking for it. Because apparently this game was not going to hit deadline again. So they actually considered delaying it a third time. But the developers didn't want to do that. So they were asking, listen, instead of delaying the game another few weeks, let's do it this way. Now, some people are still saying, oh, but it's basically forced crunch anyway, because the studio didn't offer them the opportunity or offer them the option to do it. They just sent it out and said, yes, we're going to be crunching for an extra day with overtime pay. It's not really the same thing, is it? That's all I'd say. But apparently this is what they'd been wanting to do. They wanted to hit the target. They were so close, and the developers, the actual creators, the people creating it, not just the management, not just the executives, not just the publishers, not the studio heads, the actual individual developers, coders, tweakers, whatever they are, artists, any of that stuff. They wanted to hit this. They wanted to get it out. So this is an important one to note. Now, I can't say which of these is 100% factually the truth. But it's just something that's very important to note. We have someone who everyone hates saying one thing, and we have dozens of people, or at least we have several people who have been in alleged contact with dozens of people who are saying the opposite. There's important context with this whole thing. There's the culture. I know a bunch of Polish people here in Ireland, and their work ethic and their work culture that they've brought with them from Poland is extremely different from what we know here in Ireland and with what is very, very clearly prevalent in the US. Very, very different. I know many people, so many people, who would rather break their backs work so much harder for a little bit longer or whatever it is to get something done correctly and get something done properly. It's a point of pride. Again, I'm not saying it's right, and I'm not saying what they're doing is right. I'm not saying the whole crunch thing is right. I'm not advocating that. I'm not saying it's a good thing. But it's very important to note all of that, especially with everyone involved. CD Projekt Red, people who are run out of the industry, and everyone else. Personally, I don't care. But Q, you made a segment on it. That's right, because I figured many of you would care. Me, I just want to play the game, and I can't wait. And as we're going to talk about later, it's going to be damn good. But anyway, moving on, we can get on to some potentially questionable news. Because we have more Resident Evil to talk about. Now, it's not about the new Resident Evil game, Resident Evil 8, Village, or anything like that. No. We have other Resident Evil media. The one that hasn't been so kind to the series. Although Resident Evil 6 didn't do the games any favour. Neither did Operation Raccoon City. But I digress. So, first up we have Resident Evil Infinite Darkness. Now this is going to be a completely CG TV show. It's going to be hitting Netflix next year in 2021. And it's going to centre around Claire and Leon. So it's something to do with Resident Evil 2. Now, could be those characters much, much later. We don't know just yet. It could be in around the same time. It could be significantly later. They go their own ways. They work with completely brand new story. Who knows? Because let's face it, Everything that's happened post original Resident Evil 2 has been absolutely insane when it comes to Leon and Claire, especially with all the CG stuff as well as the actual games. But woo lad, it's just a bit all over the place. Now, this one is going to be made by Capcom and TMS Entertainment, and unfortunately it doesn't stop there, because we do have some more details about the latest film reboot. That's right, if you don't remember, the Resident Evil series made by Paul Worthless Shit Anderson and his hot wife, well, they're being rebooted. And they're going in a different direction, as they say. Now, the official tagline or the official PR fluff report on this one is an official origin story adaptation with faithful ties to Capcom's classic survival horror games. Set in 1998 Raccoon City, directed by, is it Johannes Roberts from 47 Meters Down fame. Now, we also have a couple of actors and all involved here. I believe I don't know any of these by name, so let's just go anyway. We have Kaya Scodelario, probably butchered that one, from Maze Runner fame, playing Claire. We have Hannah John, my god, what a name, Hannah John Kamen from Ant-Man and the Wasp. She'll be playing Jill. I don't know who that is. I know who Jill is, obviously, but I've seen Ant-Man and the Wasp, and I just don't know who that is. We've got Robbie Amell from Upload playing Chris. Tom Hopper from the Umbrella Academy playing Wesker. Tom Hopper. Is that the guy from Minority Report? I think it might be. We've got Avon Joglia, or Yoglia, I don't know who this one is. Or Avon, sorry, Avon. This is from Zombieland Double Tap, playing Leon. I've seen that film, but I don't recognize the name. We've also got Neil McDonough from Yellowstone, playing William Birkin. So that is all we know of so far, at least anyway, with the upcoming Resident Evil media. Both the upcoming live-action film, as well as the, let's just call it CG streaming TV show. Typically, Resident Evil media in regards to CG stuff as well as the actual live-action films have been completely mixed. Some of them have been okay, some of them have been completely shite, some of them have been pretty decent. I mean, the original Resident Evil film, live-action film, the first one, still has a special place in my heart. It's not great by any means, but there's something about it that just, it has that B-movie, the quality B-movie, well, I guess quality B-movie quality, if you will. It has all of that, and there's just enough campiness to make it work. But until 2021 and beyond rolls around, I don't have much hope for this. The Resident Evil CG stuff has been all over the place, and most of it's completely forgettable. I remember, I want to say there's 3 of them. I remember practically nothing from any of them. There's probably even more. And not to mention the films have been completely schizophrenic. But hey, at least the live action films had plenty of hot chicks in them. Between Ali Larder, Mila Jovovich, what's your one's name? Sienna, you one who played Jill. There's a bunch of others in there too, but of course, they're the main ones. I don't know how I feel about all of this. Just give me Resident Evil 8. Make it next gen only. Capcom were talking about bringing it back to previous gen, current shite. Don't bother. Just give me Resident Evil 8. But now we can move on to something as equally bad news, or as equally shite, or, well, whatever it is. So this time, yet again, we're talking about Nintendo, because this time they're fighting back in a lawsuit, yet again. They've been saying multiple times after being sued again and again and again, saying Soy Con stick drift isn't a real problem, it doesn't exist, and it hasn't inconvenienced anyone. Now remember, this is the company that many of you idolize and blindly fanboy behind and praise. This is the company you love. It's the company you praise. And this is how they view you, with their inferior product design that they are not fixing, and they're actively fighting against you and your issues that you're having because of their crap. And by not fixing it and denying it even exists, this is what they think of you. But of course, you don't care about that because you're probably a blind Nintendrone. But it is what it is. Now, although chances are if you're watching this, you're not a blind Nintendrone. But yeah, you get the point. Now, just to highlight the absolute state of the gaming media and how they're such a fucking joke. You can go around to anywhere that covers multi-platform or any of the Nintendo websites, and they're all portraying it and framing it in the one same way. Because they're letting their fanboy bias rule everything. Because it gets them clicks, which gets them money. Now, what are they doing? They're portraying it as angry mother and son sue Nintendo for $6 million for all of this. I don't know if it's 6 million. I'm just giving you an example with a big number for all of this stuff, for Joy-Con drift inconvenience. But what they don't say, and they're purposely burying, is that the mother and son are suing Nintendo for this money in a class action lawsuit. They want, let's just call it 6 million. They want this 6 million available as a pool to everyone affected by this. They don't want it by themselves. But of course, the gaming media have to defend Nintendo because they're a bunch of absolute pricks. Am I talking about the gaming media? Am I talking about Nintendo? Or am I talking about both of them? Well, I think we all know the answer to that one. But you know what? Let's move away from shitty console practice level stuff and move on to some real adult PC Master Race level everything. So this time we're talking AMD. Now, AMD have two announcements this month, one of which has already taken place a few days ago on the 8th of October. And they're talking, both of them, about new upcoming hardware. Specifically, new next-gen Ryzen chips, which were revealed on the 8th of October, like I mentioned. And they're going to talk about RDNA 2-based GPUs on October 28 in full detail. So that is just a couple of weeks from now. So what do we have, important ones anyway, to talk about when it comes from what was revealed the other day for the Ryzen stuff? Well, we have a Ryzen 5800X, a 5900X, and a 5950X. These are, respectively, of course, 8-core 16-thread, 12-core 24-thread, and 16-core 32-thread CPUs. They will be running, again, respectively, at 3.8 GHz with a boost clock of 4.7, 3.7 GHz with a boost clock of 4.8, and then on the final chip, the 5950X, there's no base clock given, but it has a 4.9 GHz boost clock. Prices, again, respectively, are $449 for the 5800X, $549 for the 5900X, and $799 for the 5950X. They're all AM socket 4, and they will be available on November 5th. Interestingly enough, I do want to bring up that one of the big draws, if you will, I never really agreed to this simply because you get what you pay for, essentially, and AMD had always been typically not as good as Intel. So in the Ryzen chips, obviously, before Ryzen, all the way back to the Athlon 64X2 stuff, between then and Ryzen Gen, I guess it's really Ryzen Gen 2 where it hit its stride, AMD had been completely irrelevant and absolutely terrible value. You would only go with them if you wanted a €100 laptop or something like that. But ever since Ryzen 2 and then Ryzen 3, the third series Ryzen, because I realized that these are Zen 3 chips, it's a little bit confusing and all over the place. Thanks, AMD. But basically, in the first, second, and third gen Ryzen, they had been a bit more budget, if you will. They had been the budget option. They would give similar performance, even if it was, albeit maybe 5 or 10% slower, but they would be a decent chunk cheaper, typically, at least anyway. But with these ones, that's no longer the case. Now, it's expected that these chips at the moment are going to outdo Intel's current 10th generation. So don't be surprised if you see these chips coming out and hitting benchmarks above a 10700K, maybe even a 10900K. It's entirely possible. Of course, Intel's next stuff is due out before March 31st, 2021, but we're going to compare these with the proper stuff that's out at the moment. But with the price on all of this stuff, they've really shed the look of, well, we're the cheaper, almost as good alternative. Because now it's the, hey, we're the probably equal, if not better, and yeah, you're going to pay the same kind of money and price for it. Now, back to these CPUs here as well. None of these CPUs come with a heatsink or fan because they're designed for water cooling because of, well, the speed and core count and power drawn on in them as well. There is also, for the record, a 5600X that does come with a fan, but that chip's not really worth me talking about. I mean, it's like me giving the specs of the new i3 or something like that. It's just not really, well, you get the idea. So, I will say this, Ryzen 5000 series should be good, should be great, and I can't wait to get one for myself to pair with my RTX 3080, because, well, we all know how much of a rip the 3090 turned out to be. So, basically, I am going to try and wait for independent third-party benchmarks, because that's obviously the smart thing to do. But depending on when they come out and all as well, I don't want to risk missing these, like the whole 3800 or the 3080, 3090 situation. So I am pretty much 99% sure I will be buying 5900X come November, come November 5th when these become available. I will almost certainly be buying 5900X, and I will be pairing that with my RTX 3080 whenever I manage to get my hands on one of those, hopefully all before Cyberpunk. It all happens 2 weeks before Cyberpunk, so yes, I will be building the new computer together, and it will be beast mode. AMD also did tease a very, very small amount of their Big Navi when it came to what they showed off in the CPU demonstration the other day. They gave 3 different benchmarks, all running the Big Navi. Not too much details on it, just the fact that it was 4K and the quality settings and all that they were using. And you would get frame rates equal to, or well, not so much equal, but in around the same ballpark as what you would get on something like an RTX 3080. They haven't detailed price or availability on it yet, or any of the super detailed features or any of the extras and all too, but basically you're looking at a 4K 60 card, mostly in around the same kind of thing you're looking at with the likes of a 3080. So that's pretty interesting, but I will say, again, wait for third-party benchmarks, because off the top of my head, all the stuff that they showed 3 games in particular, 2 of which are AMD sponsored games, one of which is not an AMD sponsored game and was probably not running ray tracing, because that game, which was Call of Duty, the new one at least anyway, has RTX, the Nvidia proprietary one. So chances are it wasn't running ray tracing. And then you had the other ones, Borderlands 3 running at badass settings, which is the maximum, and running at 4K 60, and it was getting 4K 60 and above, and the same way with Gears 5, again another AMD sponsored game. So do wait for all of these benchmarks, because that is the important one to make the choice for your money and all as well. However, I will say this, is even if the cards turn out to be, that is the Big Navi versus the 3080, very, very similar in performance, and hell, maybe even the Big Navi is a little bit cheaper in price, I would not be switching over, because there are just too many features from Nvidia that aren't available on AMD that I can't afford to lose. So let's stick with some interesting new hardware. No, we're not talking AMD. No, we're not talking Nvidia. We're talking some new mini consoles. Now, this is potential stuff for down the line, because it's nothing official, nothing confirmed just yet, but it's pretty promising. Now, this time we're looking at new mini consoles from Sega. So, in an interview with Famitsu, that Sega has officially said that next they're considering more concepts when it comes to mini consoles, similar to the likes of the Mega Drive Mini, or the Genesis Mini, depending on where you live in the world. And I forgot to put in the name, but basically in the interview he went on to say that if I had to make some ideas, something like an SG-1000 Mini or a Dreamcast Mini. Now, the important one to note here is Sega has dropped by name, they are hinting at the potential idea, working idea, running potential to see how it goes, of a Dreamcast Mini being a real possibility. He's also went on to say that even if it started now, it wouldn't be complete by this time next year, so don't even expect it by, Christmas 2021, basically, which it would be a little bit disappointing because waiting on all this stuff is really, really bad. And, we get impatient and want to play it as much and as quick as possible. And as well, when you look at the overall scheme of things, Dreamcast emulation is going really, really well at the moment. It's real strong, there's a big bunch of improvements, and I'm sure Sega themselves, and even if they were to work with maybe M2 for specific emulation and all this, I think they could completely nail it. Now, the big question is, what everyone is thinking and what everyone is wondering. Games. What are we talking about when we talk Sega Dreamcast Mini games? So, Sonic Adventure, it's an absolute given, of course. Possibly Sonic Adventure 2, it wouldn't surprise me. Because these games they're not tiny, but they're not massive. Most of these games are less than 1 gigabyte. Some of them have 2 discs and stuff like that. But because they're GD-ROM compression, most of it is between, even it would cap out about 800 megabytes, give or take. Like I said, some games 2 discs and all. But you're looking at relatively small stuff. So, in theory, they could put on maybe a 32 gigabyte of flash storage and go from there. But anyway, let's go back to games here. Crazy Taxi would be another viable option, assuming either some changes were made in-game, because there are a couple of licensed music, licensed songs, a couple of licensed buildings and products and brands and all. So either some of that would have to be changed, or they would have to go and redo the licensing and all as well. Shenmue is another very real possibility, maybe even Shenmue 2, but it would be a given for me if you ask. It's just ridiculous to not include Shenmue on the Dreamcast. It's arguably the biggest and, I guess I wouldn't say highest profile, but what's the word I'm looking for? There's a certain je ne sais quoi, if you will, that associates Shenmue, what it did for the gaming industry, and the Dreamcast. So it all kind of goes well together in that way. You also have the likes of Power Stone, could be amazing, or Power Stone 2 would be a great little brawler and all to have on there as well. Resident Evil Code Veronica, the original part of where it started. Of course, it's nice to have a big Resident Evil game on there. And of course, Code Veronica is a fantastic one. Soul Calibur, that's a big important one that could be on there as well, because it was a great port and many people were big into it before it got ported onto other stuff, or, well, I guess you could call it Soul Edge and all, on the PS1. And you get the idea, there's a little bit of a difference in there too because of it. Choo Choo Rocket, another one there as well, would be a fairly, I guess you could call it kind of important one, because when you look at it, well, it really helped kickstart the online aspect of the Dreamcast. I mean, hell, all you had to do was log on to Dream Arena, which was their online portal, register your Dreamcast online account, and they would send you out a free copy of Choo Choo Rocket. And they did that for everyone. But of course, it wouldn't be the Dreamcast without fighting games as well. So maybe there's going to be a version of Street Fighter 3. There's the 3 different versions on there. You might have something like Marvel vs. Capcom 2. We might see something like Rez, which is fantastic, a game I love, and have Rez Infinite here on the PC. But you could even have a couple of other RPGs in there as well. Grandia 2 is an important one. Skies of Arcadia is an even more important one in that way. But what else could there be on there? How many games are we going to see? Would we see House of the Dead on there? House of the Dead 2, I should say. The big thing is, what games would you want to see on there? I know I just covered a bunch of mine. Jet Set Radio, maybe? Who knows? Space Channel 5? Now, next up, we're going to talk about a game. This is a game I like. This is a game I enjoy. This is a game I even gave a Game of the Year award to at one point. Last year, 2019. The Outer Worlds. Now, The Outer Worlds, as you all know, was, I can't even call it an Epic Store exclusive, because it was only for about a month or so, and then it came to Windows 10 and Xbox Game Pass. It was just kept away from Steam for 12 months. Now, that 12 months is going to run out very, very soon. In fact, it runs out on October 23rd, when it is going to launch on Steam. But again, it brings up the age-old question about these timed exclusives and all as well. And the reason why I want to highlight it so much is simply because The Outer Worlds was my Game of the Year for 2019. And this is why it's so important. So the fact that it's coming 1 year later, does anyone even care anymore? Now, I realize I could make the whole same argument about Borderlands 3 and all as well, or even a bunch of other games too, Metro Exodus and all that. But again, I do want to use The Outer Worlds as I can give my own personal example with this and why it's so important in this case. So, the fact that it's coming out a year later, I mean, I got this game less than a day after it became available, if you will. Let's just leave it at that, shall we? Fallen off the back of a digital truck and all that. But this game was available several hours, I believe it was like 3 or 8 hours, single digit hours, after it officially went live. And I played this game, and I highly enjoyed this game, to the point of where it was the best game released last year that I played. But, naturally, when I completed it, I uninstall it. I don't have the urge, the drive to go back and do more. And then when the DLC and all came out, because it wasn't easily available to me in that way, I had no interest in getting the DLC, whatever way I wanted. And I certainly don't really want to buy it again. Well, I shouldn't say buy it again, but I don't want to buy the game a year later on Steam, replay the entire game again, and then go through all the DLC. And that's a sale lost. Think of it that way. It makes me not care about this kind of stuff. The same way the Metro Exodus DLC came out, and I didn't care. Because I got Metro Exodus. But I just didn't care when the DLC came around. Either of them. Was it Sam's Story and Two Kernels or something like that? If I had owned that and it became available to me, let's just say I had bought it on Steam and it became available to me whenever the DLC launched, yeah, of course I would have went and played it. But I wasn't keeping something installed like this and then to have to jump through the extremely small hoops in order to do this. It is by no means difficult to acquire the updates or difficult to acquire the DLC and patch it and update it. It's very, very easy. But it's more effort than I'm willing to put in for a company that would do this kind of thing and a game that would do this kind of thing. So that's why, to me, I don't care. There's plenty of other games that have come to Steam after their 1 year exclusivity period, or even their 6 months exclusivity period, and I haven't bought them. In fact, there's only one that I did buy when it came to Steam. That was Borderlands 3. Still, again, I'm not happy with myself over that. To an extent, feel free to chastise me about it, simply because I wasn't happy about buying it and supporting a company that would take epic money and then finally coming to Steam. However, Borderlands 3 was a fantastic game. I did get massive amounts of enjoyment out of it. But I did kind of break my little thing in that way. Don't get me wrong, I didn't buy it on Epic or anything like that, but you get the idea. I mean, hell, look at, what's it called? Quantic Dream. I waited for that stuff to come to Steam before I bought them. All 3 of them. But you get the idea. It's just, this is the problem. It's driving a wedge and a rift. Epic are, in that case. Epic are driving wedges, rifts, divides, whatever it is, between gaming. Now, Epic, of course, are massive hypocritical cunts. They want to say that exclusives are bad, yet they're going out and buying them, and that people should be able to go and buy whatever they want on whatever store they want with no restrictions, and yet they are doing the opposite of everything they claim. It's part of the reason why Epic are so bad, and they're just massive hypocrites. Not only with what they're doing, but the fact that they're being hypocritical and saying all this stuff as well. It just doesn't make any sense. And that is one of the reasons, one of the many reasons at least anyway, that I hate this so much. A company that is, or was, instrumental in creating PC gaming with the likes of Unreal and Unreal Tournament, and of course the Unreal Engine, is now becoming instrumental in trying to dismantle what the free, open PC gaming platform is and what it stands for. And that's a load of bullshit. And on top of that as well, let's look at April 2021. Final Fantasy VII Remake will be coming to PC. That uses the Unreal Engine. Epic Games waive the Unreal licensing fees if you launch exclusively on their store. So, are we going to have a case where Sony pay for a 1-year timed exclusive on their console side of it, and then that time runs out, and you get a 1-year timed exclusive on the Epic Game Store, and then that's basically a 2-year delay before it comes to Steam and other stores? You don't see the problem here with that. That's a load of bullshit if you ask me. That's why I hate what Epic have done and what Epic have become so much. It's so hard to properly convey just how much they're trying to destroy it all and how much it goes against absolutely everything that the free open platform of PC stands for. If we wanted this shit, we'd stick with consoles. But let's move on to some other stuff that's weird and all over the place here anyway. We're going to talk about the PS5. Q, you're talking about the PS5? Yeah, we're going to talk about the PS5 and the SSD. Now, I'm not going on that usual little SSD rant that you see all over Twitter or all over other YouTube videos or comment sections. Why? Because I'm logical about this and I understand technology and I understand how this factors in for all of that. So, this is what we're looking in comparison to expandable storage, because despite we already have a couple of announced drives and all as well, we now have the first officially confirmed PlayStation 5 compatible drive. This one is what's the word I'm looking for? This one has been confirmed as compatible by the maker of the drive with WD, Western Digital. Now, like I said, we already do know that the likes of the Samsung Pro should work. We have the Sabrent and the ADATA drives. They should all work as well. They are all faster, increasingly faster. In fact, the Samsung Pro, and then you have the Sabrent, which is even faster. And then you have the ADATA drive, which is even faster again. But none of them are confirmed. There's no announcement from Samsung that it will work with the PlayStation 5. There's no announcement from Sony that it will work with the PlayStation 5. And the same with Sabrent and ADATA's drive. However, on the new spec sheet for their new product lineup, WD have officially said that this drive is PlayStation 5 compatible. So that's important to note. So the WD new black, their new black SSD line. In this case, it is the SM850 specifically drive that has mentioned PS5 backwards compatibility, and it is the first official one to do so from anyone. Now, let's look at the actual specs of the drive for a second. This drive has a 7 gigabit per second read speed, so that is 7,000 Mbps, which is 27% faster for raw data than Sony's 5.5 gigabit per second drive. It's 5,500 Mbps. So it's got a 4.1 gigabit write speed, so that doesn't really matter because writes don't really matter for gaming that much, just as long as it's not drastically low, as long as you don't have something like a 7,000 Mbps read speed and a 500 write speed, it's not really an issue, so that shouldn't matter at all in there as well. Now, as for pricing and predictions and all from earlier on in the year, I was pretty much right when it came to all of this stuff, because you have the 500 gigabyte drive for $150, but more importantly, what I was looking at was the 1 and 2 terabyte versions of the drive, because the 1 terabyte drive is going to be $230, and I was predicting about €250 or so. It's basically around the same thing, especially when you take into consideration conversions and tax and all as well, since the US prices don't include tax when they're displayed because absolute retardation of that country. And then the 2 terabyte drive is $450. Again, I was coming close with about $480 to $500, but when you factor in tax and all as well, it's going to be about the same thing. So it is good to see some competition, because let's face it, these drives aren't even out yet, not just the WD ones, but any of the other companies that we talked about. And competition is already starting. We now have 4 high-end PCIe 4.0 PlayStation 5 compatible, if you will, drives, or at least ones that should be compatible, and that's important. The other drives we mentioned are slightly more expensive, but the point is, competition will drive prices down. As the technology matures, prices will also go down as well. But the key thing to talk about here is not in relation to the PS5 and the SSD and expanding on it with another SSD. No. Out of all these 4 drives and potentially everything we see from other companies and all going forward, I will have a great selection to choose from in just a month or so when I decide to pick up and build that new PC with that RTX 3080, with that Ryzen 5900X, and who knows which of these drives, at least 2 of them, is going in that bad boy. Oh, and of course, there's going to be more storage. We're going to get as much PCIe 4.0 in there as we can, and then we're going to go with whatever's next. Now, next we're going to go back to some PC technology here because there's a big discussion going on at the moment that I want to weigh in on. Because while some of it is technically true and accurate, I feel like they're specifically leaving out a big important point of context. And that is about 4K. Specifically, it's about native 4K and how many people are saying that 4K rendering is a 4K rendering is a waste with all these new upscaling techniques and DLSS 2.0 and DLSS 2.1 and all this, that no one should be going for this. We'll just go from 1200p or 1440p and upscale with AI and all from there. And I almost completely at least anyway, disagree with this. The main reason for this is there was a time, I remember this, there was a time in the mid-2000s where people told me, people said on the internet, people said in magazines and opinion pieces, people said all over it, that gaming at 1080p, native 1080p rendering was a waste. Fast forward 10 years, not even 10 years, fast forward 8 years. You know what, fast forward to 2014, and people told me gaming at 1440p native was a waste. That's right. People told me that. I had a 1200p monitor, which I still have because it's a laptop, and I still technically have it. It's actually in there right now, but it doesn't really work and doesn't really do anything. But I have a 1200p screen, 1920 by 1200, 16:10 aspect ratio. I have that screen from 2006. I still have it. Think about that. And people tell me something like that is a waste. I have this 1440p 120Hz monitor with G-Sync, the first one of its kind. It was a big deal when it launched in 2014. People told me trying to render everything at this was pointless and it was a waste to even try. I managed to do it with my GTX 690 for years, and I could get high frame rates, high quality, high settings, high everything, and native resolution. Top end graphics card, of course. And the same is said about my 1080. My 1080 Founders Edition, until of course I get my 3080. And people will say, oh, you know, it's a waste and all too. And now people are saying 4K native is a waste. Now, there is a slight agreement here, a slight bit of context that I will say it is partially true. And the main reason for that is 4K native rendering is a waste if the hardware is not there for it. If you're running a PlayStation 5, if you're running an Xbox Series X, if you're running a 2060 Super, yeah, aiming for 4K native is a waste. If you're running a 3090, if you're running a, I won't go with a 2080 Ti, that's a plebeian card by now. If you're running a 3080, maybe a 3090, maybe an RTX Titan, well, maybe it's not so much of a waste. Because let's look at it this way. Let's go jump into a little bit into the future. 2 years from now, when the RTX 4080 comes out. Now, if you compare a 3080, let's just use random numbers here. Let's say with a 3080, you're getting 4K 60 in a game. With stuff maxed out. Or maybe not stuff maxed out. Or maybe you're getting 4K 60 with stuff maxed out. Maybe you want higher frame rate, so you have to maybe lower the resolution, which I never agree with. Maybe you have to lower a couple of quality settings in order to get 100 FPS. But that's only because the hardware is not there for it. Now fast forward 2 years when we have our 4080 And maybe the 4080 is so powerful that native 4K with max settings and 120 FPS is viable. Is it a waste then? No. It's only a waste when you can't do it. Like I said, the PlayStation 5 is a great example of this. They all say now, for months and months and months, basically all year, all the PlayStation camps, all the PlayStation fanboys, all the PlayStation YouTubers, the PlayStation media, the games journalists, aka the bloggers, all of them were pointing 4K 60, native 4K, native 4K, native 4K. They were just going on that over and over and over and over. And now, as we're coming ever and ever so closer to launch, we are seeing that that is not the case. You're getting 4K 30. You're getting dynamic, lower quality 4K with 60 FPS or a 60 FPS target. You're getting 1440p 60 FPS. Now, we all know how I feel about performance modes. We're not going to talk about that one here. But the point is, now, these shills, these people, now that their hardware is incapable of it, and it has been exposed for being incapable of it, it's now a waste. It's only a waste when the hardware isn't there. And I'm not even saying that. Well, granted, it is with them damage controlling their own little box, but it's not just specifically limited to that. If you're punching above your weight, again, if you have a 2060 Super, 2070 Super, and you're trying to play a game at native 4K, that is a waste, absolutely. But if you have the hardware for it, and if the hardware is capable for it, it is absolutely not a waste. Simply because you can look at stuff like DLSS 2.0. Sure, you can play Death Stranding at DLSS upscaled AI 4K on a 2060 Super. It's not going to look as good as it would when I run it at native 4K with that same quality settings and actual native on my 3080. But it's going to look better than what your 2060 should be able for. So you see the difference here. A 3080, a 4080, a 5080, whatever it is. 4K rendering. 4K rendering is not a waste when hardware allows it. 4K rendering is a waste if it means sacrificing everything just to get the native resolution. This is a whole other conversation that's going to change 2 years from now. It's arguably in the process of changing now, but 2 years from now, when the 4080 comes out, and you can play all the modern games at 4K, completely maxed out at 100 plus FPS, is it really a waste then, when you can completely annihilate it? No. It's only a waste when you sacrifice everything, just for the sake of being able to say, it's 4K. Remember the Xbox One X? Not the Series X, but remember the Xbox One X, when games were just touting native 4K, running at 24 FPS, and lower than the lowest quality settings on PC? You get my point. 4K rendering is not a waste. Context matters. Now that we have all that stuff out of the way, I do want to talk about something different and something a little bit important in that regard. Now, as everyone who has been paying attention knows, I'm not wearing the jacket. You can see it over there. It's hanging up specifically because of that. It's kind of a metaphor, if you will. Maybe a simile, maybe a metaphor. Who knows? Whatever it is. Now, this is a combination of a couple of things. So, one, as I've mentioned multiple times over the last couple of weeks and or few months, I'm not in a good place right now. Mentally, I'm not in a good place to do certain things. And that's taken its effect. And one of the things it's going to affect is this podcast. So the podcast is officially getting a schedule change. Typically we go weekly. Every so often something might come up, or there might be not much at least anyway to talk about, and I might push it to every 2 weeks, or at least every so often I might have a 2-week one and then back to a weekly and all as well. But at the moment, I just don't feel up to it. And I'm going to not put it on hiatus, because that feels wrong. I'm going to do one whenever I feel it's necessary to do one. Sometimes that might be weekly. Sometimes that might be every 2 weeks, fortnightly. Sometimes it might be every 3 weeks. Sometimes it might be once a month. Sometimes it might be even longer. Or it could be just randomly all over the place. They will still come on weekends, just so it's only fair that they come on weekends. Everyone gets to relax, chill out. They have the time and they sit back, relax, max and relax, chillax, whatever it is, and listen to the dulcet, smooth sounds of your boy Q laying the verbal smackdown and hitting you with that knowledge. But yeah, that's it. So, like I said, you know what I'm gonna do? It's only appropriate. So like I said, it is right now officially on a more randomized one. Sunglasses are going away. That's the important signifier. There we go. It is coming soon. Whenever. Could be weekly. Could be fortnightly. Could be every 3 weeks, could be monthly, could be whatever it is, or anywhere in between. When it warrants it, and when I not so much want to do it, but when I feel like I'm up to doing it, it's going to happen. Because, as we're going to talk about in the next section, or, not even so much talk about, but as ties in with the next section, I'm getting worse and worse from a mental standpoint. And I don't even know. You know what? We'll move on to the best section every week. What's going on? What am I doing? What am I playing? I can't even get this intro to this one properly because I'm just not altogether with it. So, as everyone has probably noticed, I've recently streamed the entirety of Silent Hill, and I've moved on to Silent Hill 2. Two games I very deeply love. Much love for both of these games. One of them I consider a literal masterpiece of game design and just game in general. Silent Hill 2. And as I mentioned a few weeks ago, that I was having issues, problems, struggles, if you will, and just the streaming aspect of it really helped with that. So I'm still going to be doing it. I'm still going to be streaming Silent Hill 2. Who knows, I'm toying around with the ideas of a spooky, scary Skeletons month, and maybe I do Silent Hill 3 and 4 all within the month. I mean, I've never finished Silent Hill 3 or 4. I've finished Silent Hill 1 and 2, but I didn't really get too far in Silent Hill 3, but I got fairly far in 4 back in the day. But now, maybe I'm going to do that. And that's basically it. There's not much to talk about when it comes to new games for the moment. Cyberpunk is a couple of weeks away, and I don't think there's anything else out in the meantime. So it's basically just going to be retro games, chilling, relaxing. It's one of the very, very few things that makes me not feel like absolute shit these days. So yes, I'm going to cling to that for the moment until I can find a way out of it. And I need to expand other stuff to... I don't want to be chained down to the point where the only way I can not feel terrible is by streaming games or playing games. So, yeah. But this is a start, and then I can step out away from it in different directions, and yeah, that's a whole other story. Anyway, comment section, guys, you know the deal. Thanks for sticking with me for this whole one. I can't even bring myself to give the full outro. Yeah. If you have any comments, questions, opinions, thoughts, feelings, whatever it is, leave them in the comment section below. Thank you for sticking with me for all of this one. I will see you whenever, wherever we do one of these again. Because now I can't even say, see you next weekend, when one of these beautiful little episodes get put up. Because, well, not just YouTube this time, but I can't even commit to it. For multiple different reasons. So, as always... thanks everyone for watching, sticking with it through all this, and remember, winners don't play switch ports.